Okay, thanks for coming everybody. Got a full house. You've probably heard me talk already this year, most of you. My name is Maurice Bentley. I'm the manager of the Postgraduate Medical Council. We do a lot of things, but the important thing that we do that's relevant tonight is coordinate the intern applications and gather them all up, send them off to your preferences and ensure that you all, or as many as possible of you, get a job next year. We've got people from the AMA and people from WACHS who will be answering your rural questions and any industrial questions that I can't answer on the 3-year contracts and co. I'll go briefly through the process for those who who missed out on the other session, but I won't dwell on that, but we will be round afterwards to talk about any of the features if you missed out or don't get it. But tonight is really about how you can best do your submission to get a job. If you're a Category 1, you're going to get a position in WA, you're going to get an offer. But if you apply to, no, it's not going to happen, but if everybody applies to Fiona Stanley, for example, and it's oversubscribed, they will look at the selection criteria you've addressed and your CVs and will rank. And so it's your best chance of getting your first preference by putting in a really good application. And it's good practice. It's more for specialist hospitals next year or the year after, and then training programs, and the same principles apply. I hope you all already know we're open. More critical to that is we close on Friday the 1st of June at 4 o'clock, and so does everybody else around the country. We'll go through at a later point applications interstate. Everybody in Australia, all application processes close on the 1st of June, and all offers to Category 1 will come out on the 9th of July. Here's the addresses you might want to take a photo. We've got a website that will have all of this. If you like us on Facebook, we'll be posting out reminders for any of the links to the application. First thing that you'll find when you go on to jobs.wa.gov, and this is where everybody in government goes if you want a job as a cleaner, nurse, doctor, anything. At the bottom where it's circled is where you have to type in your application or your interest, which is a WA Intern position this year. And this will ping up in the next screen, telling you how much you're going to earn at last. And attached to that is an application guide that has lots of detail on some of the stuff we're talking about tonight. Some frequently asked questions, and your JDF or your job description form, which is a bit kind of general, but it tells you the sort of things you'll be doing next year if you didn't know, and lists the selection criteria. That's what a JDF looks like. In every job, right up to a consultant, will have one of these at the hospitals. And over on that side there, the essential criteria are the ones that we'll be talking about listing, and that's the ones that the hospitals who are employing you will be looking at how you fit those criteria. We've got a platform that manages all these applications called MedJobs. It will do everything, as you can see there. We've got the intern application or the intern vacancy up, and under that's a radiology registrar. If you were to scroll, you'd find lots more up there. All the medical jobs come through here. First thing you need to do, and it's the only time you really need to go through this process, is populating it with your demographics. Find yourself a password you remember and an email address that you're going to use. So if you're used to using your student address, it might be time to think about a Gmail one or another, because as soon as you leave medical school, you'll never look at your student one again, and by the time next year comes around, you'll have forgotten which one you used to open it. Pretty basic fields. We do ask that if you're Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander origin, that you declare this in the application. That's for other demographics that are collected elsewhere. As you can see, there's a series of steps that you'll have to go across. Fill in the first ones. You can do that now, you can do that today, even if you haven't thought about doing the selection criteria. Just press save, and you can do that any time up until the 1st of June, but don't forget to submit it ultimately. But you can save it, all the information you've got. If you do that, you save your documents. 2 weeks later, a week later, you think, I could have written something better. You can go back and retract it and have a fiddle. Once it's submitted, it's submitted. That's the kind of detail. The specialty vocational pathway isn't going to tie you to whatever you commit to as a medical student. We ask you to update that every year, and that's just to give the health department an idea on workforce planning. And the attachments that you'll need to get ready before you submit is evidence of citizenship, a photo of your passport page, recent academic transcript. So for UWA, you can get that over at Hackett Hall. It doesn't have to be certified by a JP or anything like that. It just has to be the one that you get from them. And English language competency, what your scores are if you've got English as a second language or you went to schools. Down the front, I've printed off some standards. So if anyone is in doubt as to there's a lot of information on there that I'm not going to go through for those that it doesn't apply to, but it's important for your registration that you have competency to a certain level. You need a CV, and we'll be talking a bit more about what the hospitals are looking for in your CV. Responses to selection criteria, and Catherine will go through those. And a cover letter that you can do or not do. The hospitals aren't fussed, but if you have got something specific you want to say, like you'd like to apply, if possible, to do some of it part-time, or that you're pregnant, you'll be taking 4th term off, or whatever, that's the place to put that kind of information. PES is a term you'll hear, and once you're employed by a PES, you'll know what it is. It's a primary employing hospital, or primary employing health service. Like, there's only 4 in WA, even though there's lots more hospitals. So Charlie's, for example, the other hospitals like Osborne Park and Joondalup come under their care, but if you were to apply for Charlie's, that would be your home hospital. That would be your primary employing health service. And we make that demarcation because as accreditors, we go in and make sure that those facilities look after you well enough. They provide intern teaching, and they can keep an eye on you, and if you're struggling, they can pick you up and help you along to pass at the end of the year. Am I talking to this, Catherine, or are you, once we get into the... No? I will pass it to you to talk about the specifics of what the hospitals want.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Catherine. I'm here on behalf of the AMA. For anyone who doesn't know what the AMA's role is, basically we're here to support doctors, and that's through representation on committees like the Doctors in Training Committee, through education, and then most importantly negotiating your contracts. So we've got Sandra here from the industrial team to answer any questions later if you might have them about your contracts. But yeah, so as was already mentioned, you'll be employed by one of the primary employing health services, and while they probably have quite the majority of things are going to be in common, there are some nuances between them which you might want to tailor your application towards. So we've approached each of them to get an idea of what they're particularly looking for, and Fiona Stanley, as you can see, is quite focused on the other things in addition to your academic qualifications, so things like other courses you've done, research, volunteer work, leadership positions. They've advised to keep it brief and concise and to the point, which is always a good piece of advice. And importantly from Fiona Stanley, they've mentioned that with the overall score that's given to your application will not only influence whether you're selected to work there, but it will also influence your rotation selection. So that does then have a bit of a incentive to really lodge the best application that you can. Similarly, Charlie's is going to be looking at all of the selection criteria, and they're particularly looking at your commitment to health in WA and continued learning. If you have any particular reason why you want to go to Charlie's, they'd also want you to put that in your application as well. And they have the same system as Fiona Stanley in terms of allocating the rotations based on the score of your application, so similar there. Royal Perth has a particular focus on academics and wanting an emphasis on things like research, audits, and a continuum in learning and professional growth. Then the fourth one, of course, is WACHS, but we have Nicole here to talk specifically to that, so we'll leave that for now. But basically, general gist is that the hospitals aren't just looking at your academic transcript, it's very much to do with the other selection criteria and the picture that you paint of yourself in your application as a whole. So, the things to go into quickly, cover letter and CV. As already mentioned, cover letter is optional, but that's really if you have any particular circumstances that you want to communicate up front. That's pretty self-explanatory. CV, like with any other CV basically, longer isn't necessarily better. I would always advise to keep it to within 3 pages, 2 is ideal. And making sure that everything is really clearly laid out and easy to access, just remembering obviously that the hospitals are going through hundreds of applications, so things need to be very clearly laid out. This is just a suggestion of things that you might put in your CV. There's no hard and fast rule, obviously, for what goes on a CV, and certain things are going to be much more dominant in the overall picture of your CV. If you've been very involved in research, then that may be front and centre, whereas if you have done some elite sport, you can tell I haven't been, so then you would put that up front particular. I don't know why the AMA is the only professional membership that we've got up there, but there are obviously other ones you can be a member of. Sometimes people add a little paragraph or a few dot points on their key strengths and skills or highlights, which can be particularly good. But equally, if you're running out of space on the pages and it's looking very cluttered, then that's probably something that's not the most necessary. But yeah, basically making sure that you cover all the hard-hitting things, and the advice I would have is to put anything that's really impressive and really good up front. Then the last thing is that you need 2 professional referees, and at least one must have provided supervision during a clinical placement. Okay, does anyone, are we doing questions at the end rather than now? Yeah. So the selection criteria, there are 4 of them, would suggest a maximum of 500 words for each of those. The most important thing is to really answer the criteria. Sounds very obvious, but like in an exam, read the question. Keep it really succinct and clear, and it's really important to have specific examples of when you've met, of how to demonstrate how you've met those criteria. In terms of things to do, obviously explain what you can, not what you can't do. Sounds obvious. And very much make it use active language. So I did this, as opposed to there was a conference that I was involved with, sort of I organised the conference. And that goes down to the I language as well, first person. And the examples that you have in the selection criteria, make sure that you've also had them in your CV, and something that's good to do is to, if you think that you can't really answer the selection criteria, because sometimes it's hard to think of times when you've really been committed to improving the health of Western Australia, go back to your CV and have a look at it and sort of think of it, approach the situations from someone who maybe doesn't know you and think of how it could be relevant. So a good model, there are a couple of different ones. One's a star, so situation, a task, what you did, the actions and the results, and they should always be positive, obviously. So actually getting into what the selection criteria are, as I said, there's 4 of them. The first one, you really don't need to write much, so 500 words is definitely not necessary for this one. It's literally just that you provide details of your degree and medical school, so that's fine, that's an easy one to do. And then the criterions 2 to 4 will go into a bit more detail on. So number 2, ability to work effectively in a healthcare environment. In your answer, provide examples of good interpersonal skills and ability to work in a multidisciplinary environment and good organisation and time management skills. So I would analyse each of those components separately. You may have one example that fits really well to all of those things. So whether it was a job that you had previously, boom, interpersonal skills, dealing with customers, dealing with patients, or whatever you've done. Worked with all different people of different levels, different skill sets. Had to be organised and manage my time, which I'm sure you all have had to do doing medicine. And then that might work all as one, or you might have a couple of shorter examples that all that address each of those criteria. There may be quite a few of you who've already worked in the healthcare setting, so then you can pretty easily translate that to working effectively in a healthcare setting. But if not, again, think of the things that you do have going for you in your CV, and it could be from a part-time job during med school, or it could be a volunteer or representative role you've had on WAMS or MSAND or AMSA, .GS or any other associations. So basically the really good examples are when you've been in a team environment and it's had a positive outcome. So, commitment to working in WA to promote, protect, maintain and restore the health of the people of WA. Indicate how these commitments have influenced your decision to choose your hospital of first preference. So I'm sure that you've all been committed to working in WA to promote, protect, maintain and restore the health of the people of WA. Easy, no. Obviously there's two parts to that question. They really want you to go into why one of the 4 primary employers is your first preference. And again, I would be using an example of the work you've done, whether that's in a health setting or if it's to do with volunteering, teaching, representation for your student organisation. Those can all be translated as well, as can anything to do with research. And then the 4th one on commitment to continued learning and academic excellence is, again, more straightforward, but that could be, again, anything to do with research, audits, other courses and workshops that you've been involved in, any awards you might have won, and mentorships that you've established in looking at your trajectory and your career path. So some tips which seem pretty straightforward. Submit your completed application on time. Make sure you check the word limits and just read it as if you don't know yourself, as if you don't know you, to see if it overall paints a picture of someone that you'd want to be employing from the perspective of an employer. Some people are better at this than others, but really, sell yourself, take credit for what you've done, and play to your strengths. Play to your strengths and put them front and centre. Presentation. This is obviously to do with personal preference, but I would keep things very simple, avoid different colour changes, font changes, anything too cursive or anything like that. And the use of headings and bullets can make it much easier for people to read and find the information that you really want them to find. Obviously proofread anything that you're doing. The other thing just that I would say is with the selection criteria is to incorporate the wording of things in the job description back into your responses so that it's very clear how you are answering them and you're very much sort of flagging each of the ways that you are appropriate for the job. And then things to avoid, where something went wrong. Don't identify anybody. Lots of acronyms and jargon, and just through the formatting, making sure that it's easy for people to see what they want to see, and track changes in Word documents, obviously. I think this is this you? Yeah. All right, I'll hand back over to Maurice.
Righty. Again, this will be a recap for those who were here a couple of weeks ago when I spoke. Offers from the 9th of July. That's Cat 1s all across Australia will get an offer via the email that you've put in that you've given us through MedJobs. And the way that you accept that is on MedJobs itself. There'll be a capacity there when you log in to say, I accept the offer that I've been given. As I said, even if you're really hanging out for a job interstate, I would accept the offer. It's the only offer you're guaranteed. And then if in subsequent weeks you do get an offer for St Vincent's that you really wanted to go to, you just then have to make a choice. Do I still want to go there, or do I want the WA one, and then go into the WA one and decline? It sounds a bit bad practice, but it's the only way we can manage it with a whole 7 states and territory system where everybody's getting offers to go. But what we don't want is someone holding on to 4 or 5 different offers and then other people on categories further down missing out on a job. So accept the WA offer. If you want to take a year off, and every year we have Rhodes Scholars and various people, or people that are just sick of studying and actually want a year off before they do their internship, you can. If you're a Category 1, we'll hold that job, we'll not hold the job offer, next year when you apply, you'll be with the other Category 1s and you'll be placed first as priority with the other Category 1s. But let us know, give us a phone call, just so we can flag that you're coming back next year so we know our numbers. The 3-year contracts that the AMA have 14.1 for you will be, it's now the residents who are going into the 3rd year of their 3-year contracts this year, so it's been enacted for the last 2 years. You don't have to take 3 years. You will be offered 3 years, or unless you put perhaps in your cover letter, look, I'm only expected to be here for a year, can I just have a 12-month contract? If you get an offer of 3 years and you want to resign halfway through or not apply next year, that's okay, but just give the notice to the hospital. It doesn't tie you for the rest of your life. And I'll talk a little bit more about that with hospitals. If you think, oh, I don't want 3 years at Fiona Stanley, or I don't want 3 years in the country, I want to be able to move around, that's all possible within the 3-year contract, and most people progress from 1 year to the next, and that's the only reason you don't get a 3-year contract after you've already signed up for one is if you don't progress from intern to RMO. This time, well, we're talking to the RMOs next week. What they'll be doing and what you'll be doing next year is just checking into MedJobs and saying you want to stay or go. So this is the big application that you do this year. In about August, you will get, after you've got an offer and you say, yes, I want to work in WA, you don't generally hear much after that until about August, where you'll get a contract from the hospital that has offered you the contract. So you'll get made an offer of a job, you'll get a proper contract. And then after that, and the hospitals do vary in this, you'll get a starter information pack, which just tells a little bit more about your police clearance and working with children and the other things that you need to do. And you will get a PES term preference matrix. They all look a little different between the hospitals, but they're all basically doing the same thing, and I'll move on to a slide in a second. And then after you've made a selection of what your preference would be, in about December, the hospital that you've applied to will get back to you and say, yes, you got this, and here's your term allocation for next year. Fiona Stanley's look like this. You'll notice up the top, the colours haven't come out that well. The core medical, core surgical and core emergency are the 3 core terms that the medical board require you, every intern has to do over the first year. And then the other terms are made up to a total of 47 weeks, which counts for some leave during that time. So every rotation on every matrix will include all those three. You don't have to think too hard about that. What you do have to think too hard about is if, for example, here on the emergency, I mean, this goes on and on and on. There's many, many lines. If you're hoping to get married in the first term and need 3 weeks off, you probably won't make the 8 weeks that's required. So if you just pick a like here, the fourth or fifth one down, psychiatry, would be one of the ones that you could take in the first term because it's a non-core term and you can take time off. Other than that, if you want leave during your core terms, the hospitals generally will counsel you out of that because you've cut it quite fine. If it's an 11-week term and you want 1 week off, you're down to 10 if it's a core week. You can't have a sick day in there, or there's no contingency, and the medical board make the rules and they're pretty strict. Royal Perth looks a little like this. Each one's repeated 5 times. It's unusual, and I don't think any of the rotations will have you at the same hospital for all 5 terms. So if you go to Charlie's, it's likely that you'd be at Hollywood or Joondalup for at least a term during the year. And all the terms are accredited, so they're all good. Doesn't matter where you go, they've been accredited by PMC to be adequately supervised and provide good teaching. And Charlie's, it's not colour, anything in yellow is a core term. And there you can read across, you might have Joondalup ED, Charlie's Ortho, Charlie's Med, Joondalup Gen Surge, and Charlie's Aged Care, I think. So it'll go across. The hospitals generally don't like you swapping, so think about what you might like, and they do try and get within the first 5 or 10, depends on what the preferences are, but they will ask you, some of them, to rank 1 to 120. So just make sure that the bottom ones that you absolutely don't want, you declare. The first ones that you absolutely do want, and then the middle ones you can really put anything. Here we are on the intern application dates. We're up to the 16th of May tomorrow night. 16th of May tomorrow? It's next week. Fridays, yeah, Charlie's. You probably already know about these. And then next week, Fiona Stanley. We'll do a little session in their lecture theatres on what it's like to work at each of those sites. So they encourage you to come along to those before you make a decision. And I'll put you on to the country health people.
Okay, hi everyone, I'm David. I'm the Director of Medical Education for WA Country Health Service. I've already presented to a few of you before, and I know there's a lot of interest in rural terms, so I'm going to remind you about why they're such a great experience, and for those of you who are wavering, hopefully I'll be able to tip your hands. So a little plug for the country centres. The stars on the map show where you can go on your internship. So you can go to Broome, Port Hedland, Geraldton, Bunbury, Kalgoorlie and Albany. It's a really good experience. I did a rural term as an intern and I still remember it very clearly now, 35 years later. And I can actually remember some of the patients and the types of medicine you see are quite different to anything that you see in the city. Even if it's particularly suitable for those who do want to do rural practice in the future, but even if you don't, it's worth having a taste of it, partly because you'll understand what the issues are in the country, and also you'll find that a lot of consultants do visits to the country and they find it a nice break from the monotony of their city practice. So something to keep in mind, and a taste of the country is always worthwhile. So benefits of rural terms, you get to see the patients. They're small places, so usually you see the patients before they're admitted or in emergency. You see them during their stay, and usually you see them after they're discharged. You get increased exposure to procedural practice. So usually in the tertiaries, you really are able to actually do anything to the patients, but in the country you are encouraged to, of course under appropriate supervision. You see paediatric patients, again, exposure in the city is fairly limited. Autonomy and responsibility. usually often working quite directly and closely with the consultants, and they will give you almost registrar level opportunities, but again under close supervision, and you're part of the community. And when we surveyed junior doctors who had actually worked in country areas, 92.5% said that they were able to do things that they weren't able to do in the city. Special benefits, this is the cafe strip in Albany. Anyone from Albany recognise it? 5 minutes drive to work, so that's handy. I think Marie said that for all the health services you have to go off-site. True except for WACHS. If you do a full term in Bunbury or Albany, you are based at that site the whole year. So you don't have to, you just travel to the local hospital. No parking worries, of course. You're not just an intern, you are a vital member of the hospital staff, and your status as an intern is higher in the country than it is in the city. You're sort of highly regarded and an important member of the team. No off-site rotations I've talked about, and lots of support, both at country level from our Central Medical Education Unit, and if you're rotating, also from your rotating hospital. And most of the hospitals in the country are modern and new, and some are newer than Fiona Stanley Hospital, so there's a couple that opened just in the last year or two. So where can you go? For WA Country Health, we have 5 full-year positions in Albany and 5 in Bunbury. If you go to Fiona Stanley, there's a couple of rotations to Albany and Broome, very popular rotations, so if you do go to Fiona Stanley, you're certainly not guaranteed to get a country position, and this is where your applications are important, and Nicole will talk to you about that in a moment. Royal Perth Hospital, we have a very good relationship with Royal Perth, lots of country positions, 6 in Bunbury, 1 in Port Hedland, 5 in Kalgoorlie, all really good rotations. A lot of them are core rotations, and people generally have a really good general experience. And lastly, but not least, Charles Gardner rotates to Geraldton and Port Hedland. I'll now hand over to Nicole, who's our manager in the Medical Education Unit, and she'll talk to you about the application process.
Hi everyone. Thanks for coming tonight. I hope some of you are thinking about going to the country. If you want to go to the country for your whole internship, then when you go into MedJobs to apply, you will just select WACHS as your primary employing health service, and then rank your preferred sites. So as David mentioned, that's Albany and Bunbury, where you can do your whole internship. Rank them in order of your preference, and then you provide a statement of interest in a rural internship, which is a maximum of 350 words. You can put any extra information that you haven't covered in your selection criteria, CV, statement, anything else that you want to cover in your cover letter. Some of those things can include people who are married and want to go to the same site together, and that's really important to them. Put that in your cover letter. Maurice mentioned if you've got something coming up during the year and it's really important that the hospital knows that you're getting married or you've got a baby on the way, whatever it is, put that in your cover letter. These are all things that help to plan not just where you go, but also what terms you get when you're there. Every application is ranked on merit. A lot of people come up to us and say they're worried about applying for WACHS because there's not many spaces and they're worried about not getting in. I would say to you, don't let that hinder you. If you write a good application, if you're interested in the country, please go ahead and apply to WACHS because you've got every chance of getting a position. If you're not selected by WACHS, though, you're not at a disadvantage because your second preference of primary employing health service, whatever that is, Fiona Stanley, Royal Perth, Charlie's, your application will go to them. We choose first, and then we'll send your application to them, and you'll go into the pool that they select from in the first round. So you won't be at a disadvantage in that regard. Now, if you want a taste of the country, you just want to go for 1 or 2 terms, then you go into the centralised application process, you select your preferred metropolitan primary employing health service, and then there'll be a drop-down box for you to select to rank the preferred rural sites offered by that health service. So as David mentioned, each one has 2 or 3 options, and you rank those in order of your preference. Then you can indicate preferred number of terms. Some of them allow more than one. And once again, you can give us all the information that you want to about why you want to do a rural term. It's important that if you're choosing WACHS as your employer, that you let us know everything about your past history with the country. You might have been raised in the country, you might have done a rural clinical school. Maybe you haven't ever been to the country, that's fine. Maybe you just want to talk about your future intentions for rural practice, or the reasons why you think having a rural experience might benefit you in your future metropolitan practice. Whatever it is, just put all of that into your selection criteria, your cover letter, your statement, wherever you can fit it in. And similarly, if you just want a rural rotation, as David mentioned, some of them, like Broome and Albany, are very, very competitive and difficult to get in, and we work very hard with Fiona Stanley to make sure that we rank the applications and cross-reference them with your preferences to make sure that the right people get those spots. So as you can see, the applications are duly assessed by WACHS and the Metropolitan PES to make sure that the right people get those spots for the really competitive ones. You can contact us on those numbers there anytime, on those email addresses or phone numbers. The Medical Education Unit MEU email is one that's accessed by all 8 of us in the office, so we can answer you really quickly on that one. We've also got flyers down the front there which show all of the information that we've just talked about, all the rotations that are on offer as an intern, and also one flyer there's got information about the future RMO positions as well, in case you want to plan a little bit further ahead. Or we'll be here obviously after the session. You're welcome to come up and ask us questions then as well. Thanks everyone.